Welcome to another Quiet Paper ASMR video. For the last few months I've been quite busy with work, exams, studying, and I haven't been able to upload any content to YouTube. And now that I find myself with some more free time, I'd like to come back. And today I brought you this little book by an author called Akutagawa and by others, and the book is 3 Japanese short stories. I bought this book a few years ago, and you can say this is from a collection by Penguin Modern, and it should be £1. I bought it in Sofia, capital city of Bulgaria, and it cost me 6 lei, which is basically £1. And I think that today we could read maybe the best story, which is called Behind the Prison, and is written by Nagai Kafu. And to make a little bit of ambience, I will, as usual, light this candle. It's the same candle as I think in most of my previous videos. I should get to buy a new one because this is broken, but I think we can light it. There you go. So I'm going to keep it maybe here, so I don't know if you can see the flame. It's down there. Okay, so let's get to reading. Behind the Prison by Nagai Kafu. My dearest Excellency, thank you for your letter. I've been back in Japan for nearly 5 months. I was in the West, as you know, but I was unable to find any fixed employment or to earn academic credentials during my time there. What I brought home with me was my collection of concert, opera and theatre programs, as well as my photographs and nude paintings of female entertainers. I hope I don't get demonetized. I'm a full 30 years old now, but far from being prepared to start my own family, I continue to while away my days in a single room of my father's estate, which is located behind the prison in Ichigaya. It has a rather imposing gate and a large road of tall trees. I'm sure you could find it easily just by asking for my father. I will probably be here doing nothing for the time being. Indeed, I may have to spend the rest of my life like this. Not that I am surprised to find myself in this situation. The question of what I should do once I return to Japan is the same old one that continued to trouble me even when I was lost in music or intoxicated by the lips of a lover, or gazing at the sun in the evening from the shelter of spring leaves. I confess it was my inability to solve this painful problem and not any irrepressible longing for art that enabled a weakling like me to bear the loneliness of living abroad for such a long time. In a foreign country, so long as one's health is unimpaired, one need have no fear of starving. One can abandon all concern for reputation and answer newspaper advertisements to become a waiter, a shop assistant, anything at all. Without the hypocritical label of gentleman, one no longer feels a shameful need to deceive others. One gains opportunities to observe the hidden truths of society and to touch the genuine taste of life. Oh, but once one has returned to the land of one's birth, there's no place more constricting. One's surroundings no longer permit such freedom, and one can no longer simply transcend the demands of social position. Like a skiff on a fog-shrouded ocean, I had no clear way ahead of me, no plans for the future when I landed in the port of Kobe, which is low shingled, with its low shingle houses and its monstrously twisted black pines. Perhaps I could stay there in hiding, I thought, rather than return to Tokyo where so many people knew me. At that very moment, a heartfelt cry reached my ears, the deep, strong voice of someone ascending the crowded gangplank. "Welcome back, brother." And who should appear before me, dressed in a university student uniform, but my very own younger brother. I had naturally lost touch with my father, especially during the past 2 or 3 years, but greatly worried, he had contacted the steamship company, learned which vessel I had boarded, and sent my brother to meet the ship. Shamed by the extent of my father's efforts, I felt an instinctive urge to hide my face. At the same time, I was sick of parental affection. Why did my parents not simply turn their backs on a son who had proved himself so unfair? And why did that son feel so threatened by his sense of gratitude towards his parents? Why, when he tried to force himself not to feel such gratitude, did he succeed only in filling himself with pain and dread? No, nothing in these walls is as oppressive as and debilitating as blood ties. Any other relationship, be it with a friend, lover, wife, be it obligatory or constraining or difficult, is something one hasn't consciously entered into at some point. Only one's ties with parents and siblings are formed at birth and unbreakable, and even if one succeeds in severing such relationships, all one is left with is the unbearable agony of conscience. It is simply one's destiny. Your Excellency, I'm certain you have seen the sparrows that have built nests in the eaves of your home. No sooner do the young fly away from the nest than they escape forever from this fateful shadow. Nor do the parents make any attempt to bind their offspring hearts with morality. One glance at my brother, born of the same blood, his face so resembling my own, was all it took to fill me with an indescribable, cruel emotion. In an instant, it seemed to sweep away the inexpressible nostalgia I felt, along with the sorrow, the joy, the vivid sense of freedom of my wandering years, leaving nothing behind. Suddenly, the air enveloping me seemed to grow still, as might be imagined in a medieval monastery, cold as ice and clear as a mirror. "The 6 o'clock is an express train," my brother said. "Let's buy our tickets." I said nothing in reply. At Kobe station, all I did was stare at a few unrefined but voluptuous American girls buying bouquet from a flower vendor. After arriving at Shinbashi station the next morning, I found myself being whisked away by rickshaw to my father's estate behind the Ichigawa prison. They held a little banquet for me at home that evening. My father turned 60 this year. He probably felt he had to give the party to keep up appearances regarding his son and heir, whatever the truth of the situation. They put me in the seat of honor before the tokonoma alcove, where a calligraphic scroll hung in script with a long string of Chinese characters that meant nothing to me. Sitting on the other end of the table were my mother and father. To my right was a brother who had been chosen to carry on my mother's family as pastor of a small church. To my left was my parents' youngest child, the brother who had met my ship. Sitting there in his impressive uniform, its gold buttons gleaming, there were flecks of grey in my father's moustache, but his tanned face was more radiant than ever, and the added years only seemed to increase the youthfulness of his robust flame. My mother, by contrast, looked as though She had aged 10 or 20 years during my absence. Now she was just a shriveled up little old lady I could hardly recognize. I would want a wife or lover and, I dare say, my mother, to remain eternally young and beautiful. When I saw her looked in so aged, I could hardly lift my chopsticks to join in the feasting. Sorrow, pity, and a mix of even stronger emotions struck me all at once, an intense desire to rebel against the fate that dooms us to perish. Your Excellency, my mother was a young woman until I left for the West. People who didn't know us very well used to ask if she was my sister. She was born in old Edo and raised to be a great lover of the kabuki theater, a skilled singer of Nagauta ballads while accompanying herself on the shamisen. She also plays the koto. Approaching 40, she could still sing that wonderful passage from Azuma Hake with ease. The shamisen tune up to the high Ropon scale. Pine needles pins in her hair, she makes her way along the dewy cobblestones beside the Sumida River, writing brush in its case west with ink. And yet she has very restrained in her taste. As far back as her teenage years, she is said to have hated the color red, and I never saw another kimono of hers that could be described as gaudy, even when the family's clothing was spread out to dry at the height of summer. Perhaps a muted persimmon-colored grid pattern, or a pale blue Usain print of plovers against white-capped waves. I'll never forget all the theaters she took me to in the arms of my wet nurse, the Hisamatsuza, the Shintomiza, the Chitozaza, where we would indulge in a red treat of broiled eel or rice in a box set, and those marvelous winter days in the warmth of the kotatsu, where she would spread out her colorful wood blocks prints of such legendary actors as Hikosa and Tanasuke and tell me all about the old days in the theater. Oh, the cruelty of time that destroys all things. If only I could stay forever and ever with my mother, Your Excellency, enjoying those magnificent pastimes. For her I would gladly ferry across the Sumida on the coldest winter day to buy her those Sakura mochi sweets from the old Edo that she loved so much. But medicine? That is another matter. Not even in the warmest day would I want to go buy her medicine. Never have I had it in me to surrender to those ancient articles of faith which mankind has been commanded to follow. Such precepts are too cruel, too cold. Rather than bow before them, how often have I cried out in anguish, wishing that I and the precepts could be united in a perfect, warm embrace. But having despaired of such an icy resolution, I determined that I would confront them head-on, that I would battle with heaven's retribution. My father is a stern disciplinarian, a diligent man, a fierce enemy of what is evil. The day after I came home, he quietly asked me about my plans for the future. He wanted to know how I intended to preserve my honor as a man, to fulfill my duties as a citizen of empire. Should I become a language teacher? No. I could never presume to present myself as a teacher of French. Any Frenchman would know the language far better than I could ever hope to. Should I become a newspaper reporter? No. I can imagine myself becoming a thief someday, but I'm not so inured to vice that I would treat justice and morality as merchandise, the way such people do. These candle shades, Yurusu Jo and Niroku Shinpo, present themselves as paragons of virtue, but any society reformed by them would be far darker than a society left wholly unreformed. I worry too much about this to sink to the level, so I become a magazine reporter. No, I'm not lost in sleep over social progress or human happiness to the point where I should stand up as an advocate for good causes, nor am I the least bit bothered, as some journalists seem to be, by the cannibalistic, incestuous life of animals. Should I become an artist? No, this is Japan, not the West. Far from demanding art, Japanese society looks upon it as a nuisance. The state has established a system of education by intimidation, and forces us to produce grotesque vocalizations that no member of the Yamato race has ever produced. D, V, D, F. And if you can say them, you have no right to exist in Meiji society. They do this primarily so that someday we will invent a new torpedo gun, certainly not to have us intone the poems of Verlaine or Mallarmé, and still less to have us sing the Marseillaise or the International with the messages of revolution and pacifism. Those of us with a deep-seated desire to devote ourselves to the muses or to Venus must leave this fatherland of ours with all its stringent rules before we can begin to embrace our harps. This would be the greatest benefit both to the nation and to the art itself. No, there is no single profession in this world that will keep me alive for the days that remain to me. Should I become a rickshaw puller wandering the streets of the city? No, I have too great a sense of responsibility for that. Could I safely fulfill the demands of the profession by delivering my passengers uninjured to the destinations? And what if I became a manservant cooking rice, mixing with the countless grains? May there not be an invisible chip of stone that could tear my master's stomach, endangering his life? The more precise and subtle a human being's awareness, the less he can presume to take on any profession, however humble. First he must starve, he must freeze, he must numb to the precision of his mind, he must be blinded by his own selfish desire. At the very least, he must ignore the teachings of the ancient sages. Oh, you who sing of how hard it is to make a living, how heavy you. I turned to my father and said, there is nothing for me to do in this world. Please think of me as a mad or crippled, and do not press me to live up to no more worldly expectations. For his part, my father would have found it a stain on the family honor, were his son to become known as a reporter or a clerk or a servant or some other lowly work. Fortunately, we have a spare room, he said, and food. You can just live here quietly and keep to yourself. With that, he brought the discussion to a close. These past few months I have spent one black day after another gazing out into the garden. The hot August sunlight casts the shadow of the luxuriant trees of the garden's broad expanse of green moss. Here and there, patches of light break through the trees' black shadows, trembling with each passing breeze. I find the sight inexpressibly beautiful. A cicada cries, a crow caws, and yet the world, exhausted by the scorching heat, is as hush as the night. A sudden shower strikes, but because the larger part of the sky remains blue and clear, I can see its thick thread of rain falling in the bright light. Each of the plants responds differently to the downpour. The delicate ones bowing to earth, the stronger ones springing upwards, the sound of raindrops drinking them, varying from light to heavy depending on the thickness of the leaves. The shower symphony rises to a great crescendo with a rumbling bass drum of thunder that rolls low, to be followed by the gentle moderato of the green fox flutes, and a final hush as sudden as breeze is opening. Then the entire garden, from the tiniest tree branches soaring aloft to the tree leaf tips of the kumasasa bamboo creeping upon the ornamental boulders, is strung with crystalline jewels and lent a startling radiance to the mossy carpet, across which the masked trees' long, diagonal, god-like shadows drift until the evening cicadas call and twilight arrives. Around the time a wind chime begins ringing incessantly, and the servants light our paper lanterns. From the street beyond the front gate comes the light clip-clop of wooden clocks and the laughter of young women. A student ambles along, chanting a poem. A harmonica sounds, and somewhere far away the pop of what must be fireworks. A street musician passes by, lamenting another broken heart to the tongue of a samisen. The night deepens. The insect cries grow louder with each passing day. When I lie down to sleep at night, a terrifying din travels from the close of garden. all the way to the space beneath the veranda outside my room. What power rules these tens of thousands of creatures? What makes them all unite in one voice to beseech me like this? I feel as if I am camped alone on a magnificent plain beneath the endless sky, waiting an eternity for the dawn to break. But when I open my eyes, the dim lamp on my desk reveals that I am actually lying beneath a low board ceiling that might soon come crashing down at any moment. My body confined by suffocating colorless walls and blank sliding paper doors. Then a keen sense of the nature of life in Japan overwhelms me, so limited, so lacking in depth. The sudden clatter of raindrops against my ceiling sounds like someone trying to play a broken koto. I hear the night wind tearing through the trees above, but the sound lacks the depth of a lion's roaring in a dark valley, and I wonder if what I hear is the rustling of reeds on the shoreline of a great river flowing through a tropical plain. The insects cry without cease. They cry even after the break of dawn and the arrival of noon. And that is not all I hear. The rain falls day after day. What a humid climate we have. I try closing all the shoji and lighting the hibachi in the corner of the room, but my kimono is still so moist that I can't help wondering if my skin will grow scales like some fishy creature. A fine leather binding of the Diary of Countess Krasinska, given to me as a keepsake by Rosalind when I left America, has been all but destroyed by mold. The lacquer shoes in which I danced with Yvonne in a Parisian ballroom have grown a ghostly quiet fair. Cruel stains have formed in the summer topcoat I spread on the grass when lying there with Helene in the Bois de Boulogne. I hear the sad calls of vendors wandering through the neighborhood, and the clatter of shutters being closed near as night falls. Oh, the nights in Japan. No words can describe the darkness, darker than death, darker than the grave, cold, lonely. Shall I call it a wall of darkness, an indestructible barrier that cannot be pierced by any blade of rage or despair, that cannot be scorched by any flame of anger and frenzy? I sit beneath the only spot of light in the whole room, a single oil lamp, reading and rereading letters I exchanged with the people I knew in those days of joy, unable to read a letter to the end before having to press my face in tears against its pages. The cries of the insects filled the garden. Eventually, however, it dawns on me that the intense cries of the insects have begun slowly to fade with the passing of each dark and lonely night. I find myself wearing a new padded haori over my lined kimono, the smell of the freshly dyed clothes oddly sickening to inhale. The rains have ceased. In contrast to the morning and evening chill, the sunny afternoons are frighteningly hot. The leaves have turned yellow, but how strange to watch them as they flutter down through the windless air on the garden's mossy carpet and the harsh summer-like sunlight. I feel the deep melancholy of the French poet who sang of the South American climate. Here the leaves scatter in the April spring. I go out to the garden one afternoon and passing a read book of poems in hand, and walk among the beds. The streaming rays illuminate each overlapping leaf of the plums. The maples, the other trees that grow in such profusion, casting the shadows like patterns on the mossy ground. Deep in its shade stands a gazebo. Beyond it is an abstracted view of a flowering field. I sit to take in the immense blue sky at a glance. Thin white clouds spread across the blue from west to east as if painted with a brush, never moving however long I gaze at them. Countless dragonflies fly back and forth like the swallows. One sits high in the summer skies of France. Multicolored cosmos taller than the gazebo, blooming profusion beneath the harsh sun, spread into all corners of the field, each of which is densely covered in low-growing kumasasa bamboo. Crimson amaranth seems to burst into flame. The Chinese bellflowers and the asters retain their brilliant purple, but the white-flowered bush flowers are already past the peak and bowed to the ground like the disheveled tresses of a woman who has thrown herself into tears, flowing towards my feet upon the gazebo's paving stones. In the dewy shadows, one or two surviving insects cry out in a thin melodic strains. Ah, this blue sky, this sunlight, mementos of a forgotten summer. How could one imagine it to be October, to be autumn? The barest hint of a breeze turns pages of the poetry books on my knees until I have a clear view of the final stanza, borderless sad song of autumn. Oh, laissez-moi, mon front possessif aux genoux, goûter un très récent, l'été blanc et troïde, de l'arrière-saison les régions jaunes et tout. Oh, let me, with my head bowed to your knees, taste the sweet yellow rays of the end of autumn, while I mourn for the white torrid summer. No matter what I see, even the most beautiful flower, I wonder if it's blooming only to make us think of the sadness to come when it has withered and died. The delightful intoxication of love, I can only believe, exists to give us a taste of the sadness to come after parting. And surely the autumn sunlight shines this beautifully in order to tell us, know ye that the sadness of winter will be here tomorrow. Now and then I become strangely agitated and wishing to see the fading sunlight for even a few seconds longer, if I live to walk not just in the garden but through the gate and into the streets beyond. Oh, what since the autumn sun of my birthplace has known me. As I said at the beginning of this letter, my home is located behind the Ichigai prison. When I began my travels nearly 6 years ago, this was a tranquil patch of countryside. You know, I would tell the city girls, it is this place where the azalea is blown. Only then would it dawn on me which area I was talking about. Now, however, it is just another new district stacked together at the edge of Tokyo. All that isn't changed are the long prison embankments that loom over the narrow streets, and the life of the poor who toil there between it. The first thing you see across from our front gate is the long, weather-beaten wooden fence enclosing the jailer's compound, and then the horrible embankment itself, casting a shadow over the narrow street and topped by a spiky hedge, beneath which not even a weasel would burrow. The flanks of the embankment were covered by a prickly growth of frightful devil's thistle, one touch of which would cause your hand to swallow plain. On stormy September days, I would expect the wind to blow over the dilapidated fence around the jailer's compound, and, serene, the next morning, when the street was littered with tree branches, I would see pairs of prisoners chained together at the waist in orange jackets, with numbers on their collars and wearing bamboo coolie hats, pulling up and rebelling the fence under the supervision of uniformed sword-bearing guards. Sometimes, too, at the height of summer, a gang of prisoners would gnaw the weeds of the embankment. Passers-by would stop and stare at them in silence, eyes filled with simultaneous loathing and curiosity. The embankment runs in a long, straight line from both left and right until it curves sharply inwards at the center, where it ends in a large black gate between two thick columns. The gate's heavy-looking doors are always tightly shut. No voices can be heard from the other side of the gate, and there is nothing to be seen from the outside except a narrow chimney poking up above a low tiled roof, and 4 or 5 skinny cedars. The trees stand some distance away from one another, which to my eyes suggests that even decent feeling plants are being kept apart in the prison yard to prevent them from whispering together, plotting evil schemes under cover of darkness. When the brazen embankment suddenly gives out some distance from the gate, the narrow street becomes a downward winding slope, on one side of which, during my absence, some rich gentleman seems to have built a new residence upon high stone walls, while on the other side the road is lined with the same kind of rental tenement houses that have been there forever, like a row of boxes, one atop another going down the hill. The prison embankment stands behind them in a blank wall, thanks to which no ray of sunlight has ever reached the tenants. Their wooden foundations are wrought in and underground with moss, and insects have eaten holes to the bottom edges of the storm shutters, standing outside each unit's front lattice door during the day. 2 or 3 of the units in Ferryville have barely legible for rent signs hanging from them, and always there are signs soliciting piecework. Okay, so these videos are already 30 minutes long, and I think it would be better to do it in 2 parts, because there's starting to be some noise outside, and I think I can maybe find a better place and time to finish reading it. I hope you enjoyed this maybe shorter video than usual, and let's see each other in the next one.